How's it going, guys? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Hurricane Fiona. First off, we have other tropical cyclones to track, though. We do have a tropical storm out there. We do have a high chance of development that will potentially impact the Gulf of Mexico and the coastal United States there, the Gulf Coast of the United States, and potentially the East Coast as well. We'll have to take a look at that in a little bit. We'll also be taking a look at multiple Arctic blasts and very violent cold fronts that are going to come through. We have so much to talk about today, guys, and I'm going to try to just breeze through it. We do have some storminess here in the northwestern United States, as well as kind of like the west central United States here. Now we have areas along the middle and the northern portions of the coast experiencing some of that precipitation. And we could see the beginning of this cold front developing with this very strong Arctic blast as we see this precipitation kind of developing along this area. So we can expect colder conditions, especially up here. The cold front might even be around this area. I can't tell if it's there or if it's down to here, but for sure these areas are probably dealing with far below normal temperatures moving in at this point. Areas ahead of this, though, are very, very dry. We could see that all the way through this region. We have very dry conditions outside of our very far southern region, seeing those tropical thunderstorms. So let's just zoom in to some different regions, and we'll take a look at everywhere. We have the western United States dealing with some of this storminess here around the San Francisco Bay. Sierra Nevada is seeing some snowfall there, and then further northward we have just showers along this corridor here. Let's take a look at some of that snowfall that was taking place there, because this is going to become more and more common. But for now, it's pretty exciting to see some white here on the screen. Yeah, we see plenty of the whites and even the blues popping up, indicating heavier snowfall actually there for the Sierra Nevada. Super, super interesting stuff here. Let's go ahead and take a look here at our kind of southwestern region here in the Four Corner states. So here we are taking a look at this pocket here, seeing some precipitation move in through Mexico up kind of in a northeasterly direction here. And these will lead towards multiple different impacts around Phoenix, Albuquerque, Flagstaff. All of these different areas have been seeing quite a stormy summer, I will say, and it looks to continue here into the fall so far. We see this cold front up here to the north. We'll just take a more of a zoomed out look here, but we see the low is probably somewhere up here in Canada, and that cold front is extending somewhere down at least to here, we can tell, and that's allowing for cold air to just pour in behind, some precipitation as well. But this will be the coldest air of the season so far with this cold front, and we could have an even more violent cold front after this one that could bring then the coldest air of the season. It could top this one. Now, I want to zoom in here because I mentioned that this is actually going to be a pretty violent cold front, and this is what I mean. Look at how strong these thunderstorms are that are developing here. Record highs out ahead of this cold front, and then very, very far below normal behind it. Could be a 30 to 50 degree temperature swing depending on where you're at, and this leads towards these very violent thunderstorms because of that huge difference in the temperatures behind and in front of the cold front. Now, outside of that, we really just have a couple of these tropical thunderstorms to talk about in here. They could develop more later on today, usually the high temperatures of the day. We usually see some of these storms really fire up over land, but only time will be able to really tell. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move on and we're going to focus on the tropical activity, the upcoming pattern, and those upcoming Arctic blasts that are going to be very, very intense. Now, here we are taking a look at this upcoming storminess. As we move it towards this afternoon, we can clearly see Fiona just jumping off the screen here. Major hurricane there off the southeast coast. We see this cold front later on today. It's going to look just about like this. This cold air really pouring in just like this. And we see these pretty intense thunderstorms firing up along that cold front. We also see for the western United States, we're going to see that storminess continue out west. And then for the Four Corner states, we're also going to see this storminess persist as well throughout the day today. Now, as we reach tomorrow afternoon time frame, we'll see we have our 988 low right here and 994 low right here. And then, so that's the secondary low. And then the cold front is stretching like this, meaning that we probably have cold air just diving into the eastern United States. It's not even really a probably, it's a definitely. We see the major hurricanes still offshore of the East Coast, well offshore, thankfully. We have the Rockies dealing with some of the storminess that was over the western United States has now transferred over to the Rockies. We see this happen sometimes in the fall and wintertime especially. And as we move this towards Friday, we see this cold front will have moved through. We see Major Hurricane Fiona has decided to ride right along that. And then we have a little bit of storminess up here in the north central United States, but that's all that's left over, really. Saturday is going to be much quieter here on September 24th. Even Sunday here, we start to get a little bit more activity as a second cold front moves from west to east. This one a little bit more minor as far as the front is concerned because there's already cold air in place, but this is going to reinforce the cold air for the eastern United States. It's going to put us in an even deeper trough here in the east, which means even deeper cold temperatures here in the eastern United States and probably pretty mild out west compared to what we're dealing with right now. We see some storminess along the northeastern United States. That's because there's a low over top here up here in Canada, and that is leading towards some storminess around here for some of these regions. Now, here's our Gulf of Mexico storm. We see it starting already by Monday. We'll see it kind of reach this point and then here. But what's interesting is it likes to kind of go inland. So we see it kind of move just like this. It's a little zigzaggy, but that's kind of what we're going to see here. So let's just watch it. We see it hits Cuba. It's a 979 millibar low pressure center, so it is just developing rapidly. Kind of the Gulf of Mexico is known for that, so that's not a massive surprise. The Gulf really is known for this. We see that this cold air really just trends sticking around now, and it's even more potent at this point up here. Very, very cold air, super interesting. We have this hurricane, first off, probably make first landfall here in the Florida Keys, but it does hit that Tampa Bay area, which if you remember yesterday, that's what the GFS model was showing. And actually, to correct myself, it looks like it is a little bit south of the Tampa Bay area, but it is impacting those general west coast regions of Florida. And we see it moves off the east coast of Florida, and now it's off the southeast coast. It's in the 950s, which probably makes it a pretty major hurricane. I don't know if I would literally say a major hurricane. I think that's probable at this point, although this could be just a superstorm. And I know I say just, but it doesn't look like a pure hurricane based on a lot of the precipitation field around it. It looks more like a nor'easter type of storm, although this is a very intense storm. And it eventually heads into the Carolinas here, bringing many, many impacts here to the mid-Atlantic and southeast coast. Potential flooding, potential severe weather, especially tornadoes would be possible in this type of a scenario. Obviously, wind and waves and storm surge, all these things would be an impact. This would be the most impactful solution because we get that very major hurricane impact here to Florida. And then we get that major impact stretching all the way up and down the East Coast with the precipitation and the windiness. So this would be absolute worst case scenario. And actually, what I'm going to do here is we are going to take a look at our wind speed. Let's see. Didn't mean to do that. Oh, that's upper air. Sorry. It's a little bit unprofessional here. Not usually what I do here. This is our wind swath through the entire model run. And as we can see, strong winds along the southern Florida coast and heading into North Carolina, especially there. This is in miles per hour, so your browns would be 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts, your maximum wind gusts with this through the entire storm. And then the reds, we see some of those reds popping up, especially over Florida and offshore. We see those are going to be anywhere from about 90 to 120 miles per hour. And then those grays within the red here, that we see some of that hitting the west coast of Florida, some offshore the southeast. That's going to be 130 plus mile per hour wind gusts, which is absolutely astonishing to think about. This would be a very, very major hurricane for the East Coast if this was to play out like this. And unfortunately, we saw this same scenario yesterday, and we're once again seeing it today, which is obviously not what you want to see. Let's take a look at the GFS model because we're just going to compare. I want to get all the way to where the storm's starting. So we see it hits Cuba just like the European model here. It's a much more major storm here on the GFS model, which take that with a grain of salt. This model is kind of known for doing things like that. And then we see more of a Florida panhandle hit here with a very, very intense hurricane. And then it kind of moves up inland through the East Coast. And if we take a look, first off, at total precipitation through that point, this would lead towards insane numbers. 5 to 10 inches of rainfall for all of these brown regions popping up here for the Appalachian Mountains, basically. These blues in here in the Florida Panhandle would be about 10 to 15 inches of precipitation, which for a hurricane like this wouldn't be the most we've ever heard of, but obviously would lead towards many, many impacts. Now, let's take a look at that same wind gust swath and just see if this is calling for a more or less intense storm than what the European model was showing. Waiting for it to load in here. Here we go. So overall, the GFS model here would have a weaker storm. We don't have as many of those grays out, of the red popping up, but we do see some of those reds. So anywhere from about 90 to 120 mile per hour wind gusts would be possible for the Florida Panhandle coast here. We do see some of those grays near Cuba, so it gets off to a much hotter start here, I would say, on the GFS model rather than our European model. Because the European model down here does not have those grays popping up when it's impacting Cuba, only after. So we get to a much quicker start here, but obviously it weakens a little bit as it approaches land. In this case scenario, it actually intensifies before hitting land, and we don't get that development, that redevelopment offshore of the southeast because it never heads over the southeast here. So what we see is a weakening storm with less impacts if it was to do that, rather than this, which would definitely lead towards much, much more impacts for many different states. So we have to hope that, first off, the storm just doesn't happen at all, but if one of the two has to happen, it's definitely the GFS model that is the less impactful look to me. Now, as far as total precipitation here on our European model, a lot is what would occur with this type of a hurricane scenario. Now, if you're anywhere in the whites, we're expecting practically no precipitation. Your grays would be 1/10 of an inch or less of precipitation. Your greens would be 1/10 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. Your blues would be 1/2 an inch to an inch. Your yellows would be 1 inch to 2 inches. Your reds would be 2 to 5 inches. Your browns would be 5 to 10 inches of precipitation. And then your blues would be 10 to 15 inches of precipitation, which we see some of that for Florida and some of that approaching North Carolina as well. So high amounts of precipitation with this particular storm. Now, as far as total snowfall, because we did see some of that popping up here, we definitely see anywhere from a dusting, if anything, there in the grays. Your blues would be 1/10 of an inch, or your blues would be 2 to 6 inches of snowfall. Your purples would be 6 to 10, and then your pinks would be 10 to 20. We don't see any of that. The one thing I forgot to show you guys, because I put it in the thumbnail, is the GFS is trending at a potentially very, very rare snowstorm here on one of these two model runs. So I'm going to take a look at that for you guys too, because after this storm kind of moves up into the northeast, we see very early season snowfall pop up on this model. And it's very interesting because it is a pretty realistic scenario. Usually tropical systems like this bring very unseasonably cold temperatures with them for land areas. And this low would probably cause the cold air to really just surge in. And we just see snowfall popping up for New York and Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine potentially. That could be even worse than that, but that's definitely a few inches of snowfall for the very, very far northern regions of these states, which for very early in October is a rare occurrence overall. Now, let's take a look at the upcoming temperature pattern. That's the end of it. We'll take a look at the beginning here. We see pretty much record heat potentially for a lot of these areas. It's not looking as hot as it was before, but it is pretty hot. And we can see by the time we're reaching Thursday afternoon, we're going to be left with a southeast ridge here with this cold front looking to just shove it out of the way. Very cold and violently cold air, I would say. It's going to be nippy for sure. You can see that moving in. Your greens there are about 10 to 15 degrees below normal, and then your blues within the greens, which we see some of that there for Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, and Missouri. That's going to be about 15 to 25 degrees below normal. So a very, very significant departure from what's typical. And then by Friday morning, we're seeing very far below normal temperatures around for a lot of your eastern states. What's interesting is we just stay cold because by Saturday heading into Sunday, here's the look. We see colder temperatures. And then that next cold front is kind of moving through by Sunday, Monday time frame, and we see these cold temperatures still around. Then by Tuesday, Monday heading into Tuesday, we see the cold air is still around. Wednesday, still around overall for the eastern United States. Thursday, Friday, look, still just hanging out. And then the hurricane hits. Remember, very unseasonably cold temperatures are common with hurricanes. Look at that. 10 to 15 degrees below normal there in the greens. And then the blues there within the greens. They're almost more of a purplish tint. They're 15 to 25 degrees below normal. So very, very far below normal here around that hurricane. And then we can see it moving up inland over the East Coast Saturday, October 1st. Although I will say it looks like there's definitely a trough over the west, which means that probably once this tropical system is all said and done, we would be left with a ridge here according to the GFS model. But take it with a grain of salt because it is more than 10 days out at this point. This is about 11 days out there on October 1st. October 2nd, October 3rd. The hurricane just really leads towards these cold temperatures hanging out through the first week of October. And then eventually we get warm temperatures maybe moving over the eastern United States. But look at this out west. Positive PNA setting in, and this cold air is on the move probably towards the eastern United States. So definitely looking a lot colder through the next 15 days or so than what we even saw yesterday or the day before. Things are trending in a colder direction overall for the next few weeks, and we're going to need to watch it very, very closely. Speaking of things we need to watch very closely, let's take a look at that 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook. Here we are taking a look at it. As you can see, we have Hurricane Fiona, Tropical Storm Gaston, and then we have 3 areas of interest here. I'll start with the least likely to the most likely. Here in our main development region, we have a 20% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 30% chance of development over the next 5 days. Definitely the least likely to develop at this point, but where it's moving does give it kind of some potential. This one just offshore of Africa is expected to curve northward. We do see these develop sometimes into kind of named storms randomly. But over the next 48 hours, there's only a 20% chance of development. But over the next 5 days, we have a 50% chance of development, which is considered a moderate chance. Now, the one we really need to watch, which is the one that these models are showing hit the United States that we've been talking about during this video. This one has a 70% chance of development over the next 48 hours. And unfortunately, over the next 5 days, it has a 90% chance, maxed out chance of development over the next 5 days, which gives it almost a sure thing chance of developing. And then it's really just hoping somehow it curves differently. But we need to watch out, especially for the Gulf Coast and possibly the Southeast Coast for this storm. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to be checking in daily, so be sure to subscribe and tune in daily with us to watch every single video. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it and leave a comment down below if just with your general thoughts on all of these things. I'll see you guys in the next video.